but I'm ready to start whenever you are, Fran. All right, I believe it's the top of the hour, so let's get started with our next VWBPE presentation. Welcome everyone to our session, AI, Metaliteracy, and Digital Citizenship. I'll introduce us quickly. I'm Valerie Hill. I'm the director of the Community Virtual Library here in Second Life and co-coordinator of the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium. And my colleague here to help me out with some great examples as an educator is Rosie Wojtek, editor of the Virtual Education Journal. She edits that along with her husband, Bob Wojtek, and the journal can be found right here in Second Life as well as online at the link virtualeducationjournal.com. So I'll start by saying that literacy has changed dramatically since the turn of this century. And our presentation today is going to take a look at the term metaliteracy, which is a term that was introduced by Thomas Mackey and Trudy Jacobson in 2011. Metaliteracy is a pedagogical model that empowers learners to be reflective and informed producers of information, both individually and in collaboration with others. In other words, metaliteracy is primarily concerned with how we consume and produce information in global, digital, participatory culture. And that's where we all now live. Literacy in the 20th century and for the 500 years of the Gutenberg parentheses of time, when book was king, meant reading and writing. But now new forms of literacy are used daily, including apps, computer coding languages, scripting, blogging, podcasting, creating images, videos, and much more. So look at this quote up on the slides. And the quote says, "Educators are focusing on technology as the issue. They can't even agree on a definition for digital literacy, but instead appear to be circling the wagons around the idea that students somehow need to learn how to use their phones, tablets, and laptops with skill to deal with information intelligently. But learning to utilize tech, that is only part of literacy. And I have my volunteer educator here today, Roxy, who is also a school principal, and she's going to help us dig into just what has changed, why we need metaliteracy, through some examples, how we can become metaliterate. In addition, we will discuss how AI will impact metaliteracy and digital citizenship. Now, this is a personal matter. This is not just for students that are learning in a classroom, but for each one of us. We're going to go through the core components of metaliteracy. There are learning domains, roles, characteristics, and goals and learning objectives. Putting all these components together, you will find the metaliteracy model to be a comprehensive look at 21st century literacy for you, for me, and for the next generation of digital citizens. So let's start with the learning domains. Look at this slide and you will see that there are 4 domains of metaliteracy. Start at the top left and we'll have metacognition. And that domain, the metacognitive domain, is thinking about our thinking. We reflect on what we know or what we do not know, on our preconceptions and our pseudo-concepts. Then move over to the chartreuse green color. We have the cognitive domain, which is what we know or what students comprehend after learning activities. The lower left is the light blue, and that's the affective domain, which is concerned with our emotions, our attitudes toward learning, the way we feel. And finally, the pink color represents the behavioral domain, or what we can actually do upon successful completion of learning activities. So we're going to consider now how we learn with these learning domains. So I am going to ask Roxy to stand, and I'm going to res a 3D model here so you can see metaliteracy in action. There it is on the rug in front of us. Now I'll lower that so Roxy can come over and stand on it. And you'll see that we are working here in 3D. There we go. Roxy, I think you can stand on that. And we're going to consider some examples of these learning domains of metaliteracy. Roxy, can you choose one to stand on? And can you think of an example you'd like to share?
Sure. I'm going to start right here on the cognitive domain. So any learning goal or objective that provides knowledge and comprehension, so think Bloom's taxonomy, would fit here. So here are 2 examples of objectives to think about. The first one is, after reading several fairy tales, learners will know and understand the characteristics of a hero and a villain. Or another one, learners will know, understand, and be able to apply each step of the scientific method by completing a chemistry lab experiment. So the cognitive domain is all about knowing and understanding. So next, the behavioral domain. So I'm going to move over here to behavior. Is all about the skills and what you're able to do with what you know. So using the 2 objectives I just mentioned in the cognitive domain, learners will be able to use a Venn diagram to compare and contrast the characteristics of a hero and a villain, or learners will be able to use the scientific method to complete a chemistry lab experiment. So the behavioral domain is all about the application and use of knowledge and skills. If I move over to the metacognitive domain, hopefully I don't fall off here, think Donald Schoen's model of reflection before action, in action, or after action. It's all about thinking about your thinking, whether it's before you do something, while you do something, or after you do something. So using our examples, what information helped you decide which characteristics were for the hero, which characteristics most represented the villain, and did you use any of the same characteristics for both a hero and a villain? And if so, why? Or which steps in the scientific method was most important step for arriving at the results of your lab experiment? Is there something you would do differently next time that you use the scientific method for a lab experiment? If so, what would that be? Again, metacognitive domain is all about reflection, evaluation, and thinking about your thinking. And finally, the affective domain, so I'm going to move over here. The affective domain is all about our feelings and emotions. For example, would you rather be a hero or a villain, and why? How do you feel about results of your experiment? Were your results what you expected, or were you surprised, and why? And again, the affective domain is all about your attitudes, feelings, and emotions from your engagement with your learning and or your activities.
Great. Let's look at the roles that we all have as metaliterate individuals. And if you zoom in on this slide, here are the roles. you can see that a meta-literate learner is a prosumer. That means we're both producers and consumers of informational content. So one can choose from all of these roles on the slide, our young students even, as well as ourselves. We can be a participant, a communicator, translator, author, teacher, collaborator, producer, publisher, or even a researcher. And as I said, even young students can choose these roles in today's learning environments. And in addition, on the next slide, each meta-literate individual can exhibit a variety of active learning characteristics as prosumers, being both consumers and producers of information, and I mean even kindergartners are producers and consumers. A meta-literate learner shows these characteristics. They are collaborative, participatory, reflective, civic-minded, adaptable, open, productive, and informed. So, Roxy, can you consider how all of these domains fit with teaching, with particular lessons, and how they fit together? Roxy?
Sure. So I'm moving back onto the domain model, and I'm going to use the example of teaching, what a teacher does, and what a student does when learning to write a haiku. And I'm using haiku as an example because it's a universal and relatable example for students of all ages, kindergarten through adult. But you could choose any topic since the meta-literacy model can be applied to any educational goal or objective, just like it does in this haiku example. So first I need to explain before we get into the example that this model is not linear and teachers and students will move back and forth among each of the domains throughout the learning process. They can also be in more than one domain at any given time. So I'm here in the cognitive domain, so let's start here and I'll give you a sample lesson goal and objective for this example. So I'm going to use, after reading haiku and learning about the short form of Japanese poetry, students will be able to demonstrate their understanding of spoken words, syllables, sounds, and haiku structure by writing their own haiku. So before beginning the lesson, the teacher needs to assess what each student knows about a haiku and what needs to be taught, which, as we all know, is a pre-assessment. Depending on the context and the situation, the teacher uses a variety of instructional strategies to pre-assess the students, as well as during the lesson to ensure students gain knowledge and understanding of the haiku. Throughout this example, the teacher's role will be teacher. However, depending on what the teacher's actions are in any given lesson, the teacher most likely will be using some, if not all, of the meta-literacy domains, roles, and characteristics. In fact, we're hoping that the teacher will be modeling those for their students. But due to time and so as not to confuse what we're talking about, we will focus on one student. While in the cognitive domain of gaining knowledge and understanding, students can take on several different roles such as participant, teacher, collaborator, and communicator, as well as a variety of characteristics such as participatory, informed, collaborative, reflective, and open, depending on how the lesson is taught and the expectations for the student behavior. For example, teachers may structure the lesson with students teaching other students in small groups, such as a jigsaw cooperative learning structure, with a teacher facilitating the process and perhaps even learning from the group discussion. So as you can see, the teacher and student movement between domains, roles, and characteristics is a very fluid model, lots of back and forth between domains. So during the cognitive learning, students will not only gain knowledge and comprehension, but they may also be asked to do something such as create, analyze, assess, and evaluate the haiku. When this happens, students will be demonstrating their skills in the behavior domain, along with what they know and have learned about haiku in the cognitive domain. This can be through roles such as participant, communicator, collaborator, and producer, and through characteristics as in informed, participatory, and reflective. Notice that I say reflective because reflective is not only a behavior, but it's also found in metacognitive domain. If students evaluate feelings, either their own feelings, the author's inferred feelings, and/or interpretations about haiku as part of the knowledge acquisition that they're using in the cognitive domain, they may also be in the affective domain. So as you can see, during the course of gaining knowledge and understanding in the cognitive domain, students can move in and out of the other three domains too. And even after students think they've moved beyond the cognitive domain, they may in fact cross back into the cognitive domain because to complete an assessment about what you've learned or to write your own haiku, students must draw upon the knowledge and comprehension of a haiku. So when students have demonstrated their knowledge and understanding of haiku, the next logical step is to write their own haiku. So I'm going to move over here to the behavioral domain. And during this process, teachers and students may move back and forth between, like I said, the cognitive domain to learn how to write their own haiku and the behavioral domain to apply their knowledge and develop their skills by writing their own haiku. So in the behavioral domain where students are using what they know and can do, in this case, write their own haiku, depending on how the lesson is structured by the teacher, students can write and illustrate their own haiku, either individually or collectively. So the role of the student may focus on being an author, a communicator, and producer, and the metaliteracy characteristics used can be that of productive, reflective, and perhaps even collaborative. Again, when you hear me say reflective as characteristics, note that it can be a behavior, but it also means that the learner has moved into the metacognitive domain. Likewise, students as authors are also more likely to be in the cognitive domain as they think about using appropriate words, syllables, and sounds to create their own haiku. As they write, they're also reflecting on their haiku, the metacognitive domain, to ensure that they're using a specific haiku structure. And the affective domain is also used by students as they carefully and intentionally select the words that they will convey for their emotions, feelings, and attributes in their haiku. So as you can see, I need to stand in the center of the model. So I'm going to move over here, hopefully in the center or as close to it as I can get, because this is where I can easily move back and forth between all domains, which I'm not going to do, but because it gets really kind of crazy. But so you know, I'm standing in the center because this is where all the action is really going to take place as student moves in and out of all these domains. So after the haiku is written, students and authors will evaluate their work as informed publishers. And when it's ready, they can either read their haiku independently and or share their haiku with classmates and their teachers. Sharing their work with the class and listening to what others are sharing can happen in a variety of ways. So, for example, you could have a whole class, a small group, a carousel structure where they go around the room and look at each other's work. And during this reading and or sharing portion of the lesson, the presenter can take on a variety of roles and characteristics. For example, the student might present her haiku to her classmates by explaining what her illustration means, why she picked a particular topic for her haiku, how and why she chose specific words, and the emotions and feelings that she wants to convey. And by doing this, the student could be a communicator, an author, a producer, a publisher, and a collaborator by using the characteristics of a collaborative, open, participatory, and reflective learner. Students listening and perhaps offering feedback to the presenter could take on roles such as communicator, teacher, collaborator, and participant by using meta literacy characteristics such as collaborative, participatory, reflective, open, and informed. Thus, the author, presenter, and audience could be moving in and out of all four of the domains during the sharing and feedback portion of the lesson example as well. When students reflect upon and evaluate their own work or provide feedback to each other's haiku, they're most likely working in all four of the domains. So for example, students use their knowledge and comprehension from the cognitive domain and the skills that they acquired from the behavior domain to analyze, evaluate, and reflect upon their work. The metacognitive domain is used to provide feedback as to whether or not the author used the 5-7-5 syllable structure, captured a fleeting moment, evoked a sense of nature, created a specific feeling or human experience, and was simple yet direct. The author presenter may use the affective domain to share the feelings and emotions she wanted to convey, and the audience may describe their own feelings and or emotions about how they felt while they were listening to the haiku. Finally, the author, presenter, publisher could reflect on her haiku metacognitive domain as well as the feedback from the teacher or student audience. What feedback was helpful? What might I do differently, if anything, next time I write a haiku? So in addition, students may reflect metacognitive domain about their emotions and feelings conveyed by the haiku, and that also brings in the affective domain at the same time. So for example, on a scale of 0 to 5, what being the highest, how do you feel about your haiku and why? What do you like best about your haiku? And do you want to write more haikus? Why or why not? In the final evaluation phase of the lesson, the student using roles of author, presenter, publisher, communicator, and collaborator also could be using the meta-literacy characteristics of productive, collaborative, reflective, and open. So as you can see, this is a really fluid and ever-changing model as far as the teacher and or the student being able to move in and out of these 4 domains. Finally, the author could also be adaptable should she decide to either revise her haiku based on the feedback and or use what she learned from the feedback when writing her next haiku.
Roxy, as an educator, have you witnessed students exhibiting these roles from the meta-literacy model and characteristics in 21st century digital culture?
Yes, absolutely. Everything I already shared works in a 21st century model, even when we're physically in the typical classroom with the high quality teaching and learning, but without the technology and digital learning. But it also works, and some might argue even better, in a classroom when students are also using digital technologies. And of course, it's difficult to use AI without a computer unless someone is reading a printout from an AI-driven search article or website. So for example, students who are using digital technologies could cognitively be gaining new knowledge or understanding while they're listening to a media presentation. So for example, a video, a podcast, visiting a website to do research on a specific topic, or listening to a guest speaker via Zoom or YouTube live stream event, and perhaps even actively engaging in the learning with the speaker and other viewers via the chat as they gain cognitive knowledge and understanding through digital environments instead of traditional teacher lecture in front of the classroom. These are only just a couple of examples of digital uses for students gaining knowledge and understanding in the cognitive domain. So when students are practicing or honing new skills, they might be creating charts and graphs in Google Sheets and Excel. They could be publishing their work online on a classroom blog or newspaper. Or they could be creating a digital art collage wall, AI digital tapestry, or by sharing what they learned via a video that they're producing. These are all just a few examples of digital use in the behavior domain. Likewise, students can reflect upon their classmates' work when it's posted in a secure place on a classroom server, website, or software platform such as Blackboard and provide each other with feedback. Students can write entries into their own online journal. They can collect samples of their work, share reflections about their work, and save their work sample artifacts in an online student portfolio to later share with their teacher, parents, and or other people who are important to them. Students can use digital tools such as Padlet, Wakelet, and Kami for reflection. For example, Padlet is a great tool for creating a virtual wall, performative assessments, and even an exit ticket for closure to a lesson. So all of these are digital ways to reflect and think about your thinking while in a metacognitive domain. And finally, digital tools for use in an affective domain can include gamification, things like badges, points, and leaderboards to make learning fun, more engaging, and motivating. So using social media platforms to connect with others, build relationships, and hold class discussions on various topics of interest are a great way to establish friendships, bonds, and feelings as long as the platforms are supervised, age appropriate, safe, and occur in positive, structured spaces. So all of those are examples of affective domain and excellent ways of integrating technology into this meta-literacy model.
And when we put these meta-literacy domains that Roxy is standing on, and the roles and the characteristics all together, we have the meta-literacy model. And you can see it on the slide with the circles around it showing the roles and characteristics. And this is a new way to look at literacy and be literate in the 21st century with evolving information landscapes and with multiple realities of the metaverse, and certainly with the rise in the use of AI. So I'm glad Roxy said this could be taking place in a physical classroom, but I think the metaverse and its 3D building is the perfect way to introduce meta-literacy. I'm going to pull out a 3D model. I do want to tell you that hot off the press, right now, even as we speak, the impact of AI is currently impacting meta-literacy and the meta-literacy learning objectives. The meta-literacy goals and objectives, the entire model can be found at metaliteracy.org if you want more information about it. But being meta-literate is not a skill that we simply master. It's ongoing. We spiral through these domains. So let's look at the meta-literacy 4 goals and learning objectives now before I pull out our prototype 3D model. And here they are. We'll read all 4. Goal 1, reflect on your identity as an active learner within evolving information environments. We're here in the metaverse, and digital identity is part of digital citizenship. Goal 2, critically evaluate and ethically produce information, reflecting on your roles and impact across platforms. Goal 3, contribute informed and ethical perspectives in collaborative social settings. And goal 4, develop continuous learning strategies through a meta-literate mindset. Each one of these goals has specific learning objectives as well, and you can look at those later on the metaliteracy.org website. However, to save time today, I really want to focus on how AI is impacting meta-literacy. And right now, as we speak, the new learning objectives for Goal 2 and Goal 3 are being revised to include AI. So I'm going to go through the goals and show you how AI is impacting meta-literacy, starting with Goal 2. Goal 2 states, critically evaluate and ethically produce information, reflecting on your roles and impact across platforms. Now, I mentioned earlier, even really young students are taking in and producing content, particularly in the metaverse, in worlds like Roblox and Minecraft. So what are the learning objectives for this Goal 2? 1, see oneself as a producer as well as a consumer of information. And note the initials there, A for affective domain and M for metacognitive domain beside each learning objective. Objective 2, examine how awareness of your personal biases informs your ability to engage constructively and collaboratively. Evaluate information from individuals, organizations, and the broader institutions they represent, distinguishing between opinion and fact. Create original content that adheres to ethical principles and respects intellectual property, reflecting on your thoughts and decisions. And note I have highlighted on goal objective, learning objective number 5, evaluate the role of AI in shaping content, ensuring ethical, accurate, and responsible engagement with its generation and impact. And the revised meta-literacy Goal 3 states, contribute informed and ethical perspectives in collaborative social settings. Students are doing this every day online. This is digital citizenship. And I believe You really can only be a good digital citizen if you are meta-literate, even if you haven't heard that term. So the learning objectives for Goal 3 that are currently being revised reflect on your role in collaborative settings to develop self-awareness of your contributions and their impact. Model ethical and respectful communication in your collaborative interactions and through your shared content. Foster meaningful engagement through your contributions to local and global communications. Develop ethical and creative approaches, both individually and collaboratively. See the highlight? To engage with AI to produce responsible content. Seek collaborative opportunities to produce meaningful and ethical outcomes, reflecting on how your engagement and decisions contribute to the process. You can refer to these goals and objectives later at the Metaliteracy site developed by Mackey and Jacobson. I'll put a few references up here. I really want to demonstrate in 3D how teachers and learners can become meta-literate. And as I said, the metaverse is a great place to demonstrate this. This is a prototype, but I believe students could also build in 3D how they are learning and learn about digital citizenship in 3D. So I'm going to res my Metaliteracy in 3D box. As I said, this is a prototype. I may have to turn it around here for, oh, I think that's probably a pretty good place for it. This is a Metaliteracy box, and I'm going to put out a beanbag for Roxy to sit on. And she's my Metaliterate learner. So Roxy, if you'll take a seat. You might have to try it twice. My beanbag, yeah, my beanbag was scripted by ChatGTP, which is not perfect at scripting.
There, we did it.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move her into the box. And Roxy has already talked about this being an ongoing process. So she's in the model. She's taking in content, producing content. You know, literacy used to really mean reading and writing, but it means much more today. Zoom in on the right side of the box and you will see, over here on the right, I'll zoom in on mine too, you will see all of the roles of the Metaliterate learner that she can choose from. And zoom in on the left side of the box and you'll see that she has characteristics that she's going to exhibit as a Metaliterate individual. So Roxy, can you, inside this box, share an example to illustrate how these roles, characteristics, and domains all fit together for a learner using the goals and objectives I just talked about? And also, do you agree that learning in the 21st century has revolutionized literacy?
I wholeheartedly, totally agree. I think for me, the best analogy that I've heard to explain this is from an article on the Fujitsu site, and it's titled AI, the Digital Age's Gutenberg Printing Press, and it was written in 2024. And the article begins with, and I'll quote, "Artificial intelligence is the modern day equivalent of Gutenberg's printing press in a world focused on efficiency. Much like the 15th century breakdown that made books widely accessible, AI democratizes access to information and intelligence, transforming business operations, enhancing efficiency, and propelling productivity." So this analogy to me is the epitome of the evolution of AI and why more than ever we need to understand and use the meta-literacy model. In a world that's rapidly evolving, morphing, and transforming because of AI, the 4 domains, roles, characteristics, and goals of meta-literacy address a more urgent need to definitely change our previous notion of literacy from just reading, writing, and mathematics. So for me, I use AI primarily when I'm doing searches using a browser like Google or using AI tools like Google Gemini, ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot to ask research questions. I can ask questions or type in a topic and get almost immediate answers on pretty much anything personal or professional. A good example for students is to use AI for research or to answer questions, much like how in the past we used a dictionary or encyclopedia to get information. But AI is more current and up to date, much faster and easier to use than an encyclopedia of the past. Because those encyclopedias, as we all probably remember, or most of us, that they were past their due date before they were even published. So like this example of using AI for finding research and gaining information, depending on what and how you're using AI, the meta-literacy model works as a framework for teaching and learning. So for example, the meta-literacy goal 2 should be used by students of all ages who are using AI tools to help them find answers to their questions, information, or the latest research on a particular topic. Any digital content, but especially that produced by AI-generated tools, must be evaluated by the user to ensure the content is free of biases, and if not, to make the biases explicit upfront. It also must be evaluated to ensure that the information and research is transparent, current, and accurate. The student user, and for that matter, all of us, must also distinguish between what is fact, what is fake, and what is opinion. And to do this, students take on the meta-literacy roles of author, communicator, producer, and publisher by using meta-literacy characteristics such as productive, informed, collaborative, and reflective. Learners must continuously reflect upon and evaluate their own learning and their work as it relates to their use of AI tools to ensure that they are individually or collaboratively creating, communicating, and producing, or even publishing meaningful, ethical, and responsible content, products, and/or outcomes.
Indeed, AI is impacting literacy, and more of our lives are spent online with content that is born digital. One cannot become a good digital citizen, as I mentioned earlier, without meta-literacy, even if you don't call it that. AI tools for creating content in all formats are rapidly evolving. We can create images, write in numerous styles, even create videos and presentations using AI. So I'm going to bring Roxy out of the model. Let's move her beanbag right over here. Oops, I'll take my model back, move Roxy right over here. Gotta click on her beanbag.
It's kind of hard.
And then when I bring her out, okay, here's her beanbag. No. Okay, Roxy, try moving your own beanbag.
I will try. I'll give it a try.
Up arrows, down arrows, side arrows, and then when she's out a little ways. Okay.
Well, I keep hitting your.
Okay.
This is hitting the wrong thing.
Great example of how messy it can be with AI and meta-literacy. It's not a linear process.
All I can get when I click on it is, let me try a different angle. Here we go, maybe. Nope, I'm still just getting your.
Okay, the beanbag should move with your arrows, your up arrow, your down arrow. There you go. It's scripted.
Hey.
Okay, she's moving around, yay.
Yay, well, I might be out in the audience in a minute. Okay, well, I'll just stay here. Is that okay?
Yes, yes, right there's fine. A meta-literate learner has to learn. There's so much to learn and it's always changing. So I think this is a good analogy for it. Okay, so now that she's out of the beanbag, I'm going to represent AI now with a large sphere. Oh, here comes our AI sphere. Don't let this bump anyone on the head. But this is what you can do in a 3D world. You can bring things out and create them in 3D. So here comes our sphere. Okay. And I'm going to move it a little bit back so it's not too close to the audience here. AI is represented by a large maroon sphere. Now it could be any color. I chose this just to show that we can see in it, and you'll see there are a lot of other beanbags in there. Other meta-literate learners are inside AI and around AI, coming in and out of AI. You might have to use your Alt left click to zoom in and cam out so you can see Roxy. And you'll notice some are dipping in, some are dipping out. What does that mean? Well, even a simple online search today is using AI. So we're all using it every day, sometimes without even realizing it. I'm going to ask Roxy, and I'm going to move her into the AI model, although she could move herself.
No, I can't. It's not moving.
All right, I'm going to move you up, okay, and into the AI model. Okay, now she's inside AI. So Roxy, as you're here in AI, in the model, and you think about AI using metacognition, can you describe how you feel as you move in and out of AI?
Sure. I consider myself an omnivore and a lifelong learner. I'm really excited and I love how fast it is to have information on almost every topic conceivable at my fingertips. And I love being able to get my questions answered almost immediately from anything about a film or TV show, such as ratings, the trailers, and the cast, including personal information while I'm watching a movie or a television show, to medical, political, and current best-selling fiction or nonfiction substacks, blogs, or publications, to how to do almost anything a person would want to know or do from a curated list of related Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube tutorials and videos. That to me is exciting and so much better than back in the old days when I had to go to the library to get that information. At the same time, I'm concerned, I'm cautious, and I'm nervous, sometimes really nervous about how quickly and how fast AI is changing the world that we live in, much like I'm sure that the Gutenberg printing press all of a sudden changed people's lives. I often wonder if they were asking the same questions that we're asking ourselves today. I think my biggest fear is that CEOs of major social media platforms like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are accepting all posts, including false information and conspiracy theories, and are no longer fact checking them or removing them. What scares me the most is that the information, and I'm talking the good, the bad, and the ugly, all get sucked up in the integrated by the AI generators. And soon, perhaps sooner than we can imagine, the truth will be blended, morphed, and transformed with non-truth, and we will no longer recognize or be able to distinguish between what is real and what is fake, what is reality and what is fiction, imaginary, and most of all, illusory.
I'm glad you pointed that out on the Metaliteracy site. It's sometimes referred to as a post-truth world. Can you evaluate your own use of AI and how students may use it ethically as the goals state?
So for me, it all comes down to evaluating the AI content I'm using to make sure it's current, accurate, and a reputable source. I also make sure that I have distinguished whether the information is fact, fake, or opinion. And that way, when and if I communicate the information to others, either in person, on social media, other forms of publications or presentations, I make sure to cite the sources I'm using and let my audience know whether the information that I'm sharing is fake, fact, or opinion. That makes a huge difference as we share information with others. My biggest pet peeve is when someone takes something that I've said, that I've written, and even published, and uses it as their own work, including putting their name on it. I have no problem with people quoting me or citing my work, so don't get me wrong. But when someone is using something of mine as their own, it's the most unethical, egregious use and violation of intellectual property rights that I can think of. I'm sure most, if not all, authors, entertainers, artists, anyone who builds or creates something would agree. So for me personally, as a producer and consumer of information, no matter what I'm doing, I try to make sure I've examined and also I'm aware of all of my own biases so that I can understand them and be able to let other people know if I do have biases and what they might be. I also evaluate resources and information to try to remain adaptable and open to new ideas and perspectives, especially when I'm working collaboratively with others. And I also make sure to give credit where credit's due to anyone who has created content that I'm using. And like most people, I will continue to monitor and evaluate the role of AI as it proceeds to shape and inform every element of our lives, no matter who we are or what country we live in around the world.
Thank you for sharing your own perspective as a metaliterate learner. I'm going to take up the sphere now. As we're starting to wrap up, I think we've all seen how AI is impacting metaliteracy right now, even as we speak. I recently was asked to share a blog post on the Metaliteracy site about teaching and learning metaliteracy here in the metaverse. And you can read that. I'll put the link there in the local chat. Here in the metaverse, in Second Life, a virtual world allows us to build models of our critical thinking in 3D. And that was what I wanted to demonstrate for you here today. Students can build in 3D, and that's part of literacy. So we are going to want to open up for some questions, and perhaps one of you might even want to be a volunteer to come sit on the Metaliteracy beanbag to consider how your own literacy is changing. I'm going to move this beanbag down to the floor.
It's a lot of fun if anybody wants to try.
Roxy pointed out that metaliteracy works in both the physical world and the virtual world for teaching and learning. Currently, I'm working with younger students, 8 to 10-year-olds, in Mind Test, which is a Minecraft blocky type world. And I've modified the vocabulary for their understanding. Look at the domains: metacognitive, cognitive, behavioral, affective. Those words, I wouldn't really use them with an 8-year-old, in day-to-day, their conversation about learning. So we can show you, and Roxy, I'm going to wear one of my flags. I'll stand up and walk out here to wear my flag so people can see it. Be sure to add, don't wear. There's always a problem if you wear something rather than add it. And I'll step over here in front of the model. To simplify the terms for young kids, metacognitive could become simply think. They can think about their thinking. So let me find my metacognitive, or I'll wear my feel. Okay. The affective flag, and if you look, cam in on one side, it will say the word for the domain, and on the other, the simplified, modified vocabulary for kids. Metacognitive is simply to think. Affective is to feel. Behavioral is to do. And cognitive is to know. And these kids are learning these concepts of both metaliteracy and digital citizenship. And they're building them in 3D in Mindtest or Minecraft or in some of the worlds where they are going into 3D worlds. I believe this has to start at a young age. So feel free to use voice or chat if you have any questions or any feedback about the 3D AI and metaliteracy model. Waving my flag here.
It looks like we have a question from Namara. She's asking, the Fujitsu site states all democracies access to information and intelligence, transforming business operations, enhancing efficiencies, and propelling productivity. Yet, in reality, AI is skewed to represent the ideas, values, and experiences of white male patriotic perspectives. You mentioned learners must continuously reflect upon and evaluate their own learning and work as it relates to their use of AI tools to ensure they are individually and collectively creating, communicating, producing, and publishing meaningful, ethical, and responsible content, products, and/or outcomes. My question is, how do students do that when the system is stacked, if you will, against the experiences, accomplishments, challenges, etc., of women, people of color, and other marginalized groups?
Wow, that is a very powerful question. And our scope today is primarily really focusing in on how literacy has changed. Your question really, I feel like it aligns to digital citizenship and the fact that our world has become not just a physical world of small towns, but a global world of virtual communities as well as physical communities, and it's messy. And there are a lot of problems that we face that digital citizenship can help, and so can metaliteracy. But we can't really go into the scope of the future and how all of this is evolving in this short amount of time, but it's a great, powerful question that addresses the need for meta-literacy and for digital citizenship. Anybody else have a question or a comment about building these ideas into 3D to enhance the learning?
And she also says maybe the next question is a little more suited then. In the US, a full-out assault is being waged against libraries and other long-time trusted information sources. How do you get students who are accustomed to easy access to information to be factual or misinformation, to value the extra effort needed to look for differing opinions, which are easily removed from their search because of the AI language models used coupled with a natural, youthful laziness? And that's it for me, promise.
Oh, your questions are so good, Namara, because a lot of people have so much concern about the problem of censorship, intellectual freedom to read what we want, think what we want, speak the way we want to speak. And it's both, as prosumers, worrying about what we're consuming, is it accurate, and what we're producing. And it's for me, when I think about the next generation, that's why I say it has to start really young. Kids need to realize that the world that they live in is impacted by AI, and that it's up to each one of us to be personally responsible for that production and consumption of information, to learn how to navigate these very messy, changing information landscapes. I was a librarian when libraries were books and print, and they had a lot of hoops to jump through to come into that library to be sure they were accurate. It wasn't perfect. There were always mistakes, but at least you could walk in with some comfort. You don't have that online. There's no comfort about accuracy, and we have to teach them young to realize that we're each responsible for meta-literacy and digital citizenship.
She goes on to say there's also the issue of when trying to be inclusive in AI also gives answers that are terribly fake, like the well-publicized Black and Asian Nazis in images.
Yes, and that came from Hypatia. Thank you. That's a good example of how messy AI is. And, we have to worry about our own use of it and our ethical use of it, but we also have to realize how difficult it is to evaluate and to teach the next generation to evaluate AI when it's so easy to use, and that all of the search engines are already using it. If you're interested in both sides, the pros and cons, at 10 o'clock we will have an AI boxing match right here in this room, a boxing match debating the pros and cons of AI. And there's also a quadrivium, I believe, later today talking about it, because we're just at the beginning of the huge impact of AI on literacy and learning. And there's a lot that we need to learn and a lot that we need to reflect upon. Talk about metacognitive. All of these domains are being impacted by AI. And I know we're almost out of time. Yes, Roxy?
Oh, I was just going to say, and I would add, I think the most important piece of all of this is that it needs to be taught to students. And I agree with the youngest age of whatever that is. I mean, beginning in pre-K, to let people know that these issues do exist, and that trying to bring in the diversity. And I know we're not supposed to talk about DEI, but I know that's what we're getting at. And as best we can at the moment, because of what's happening politically around the world, we need to be really cautious, but we need to bring that in. It's kind of like, think back, like for me as a elementary student, I had to learn from the teacher not to copy the words out of the encyclopedia, not to take everything as fact, because showing that, okay, so the encyclopedia says that this is the name of a country, but it's already changed by the time you use the encyclopedia. All of those kinds of things were issues back when I was a kid, and now we've just got different issues, and we need to be explicit in our teaching in order to make sure our students learn.
Absolutely. And it is time for us to wrap up. So we will say thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and bye for now. Keep in touch.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you learned a lot about meta-literacy.